Welcome to everyone. Thank you for your patience coming through the doors. My name is John Battle and I'm in Leeds with the SVP there, and I've been asked just to help steer us through the next couple of days. So thank you to everyone for coming. Can we welcome through that our speakers, all our speakers, of course members of the Ascension family, Congregation of Mission, Joseph Charity, the Paul Trust, and the National President is here. Welcome, welcome. And can we have a special welcome as well to new members that haven't been before to a national meeting, and to any friends as well. You are all most welcome. A couple of days ago someone said to me that the challenge of our society is twofold: polarisation and isolation, and as a result we've lost the ability to really listen and share. And I think the next few days are for us to listen and share, and perhaps in the tradition of the great St. Benedict at the beginning of his rule, can we listen with the ear of our hearts? And if that was our task, we have a fantastic title, Building the Kingdom. See what we can do in the next 2 days to work through that, through listening to talks, through the seminars and the workshops when we've to do the work, and then to take it away from here to enliven the world. A few housekeeping points to start with. First of all, mobiles. John Battle, switch your mobile off. Don't let it ring while you're making your own speech, which has happened before. Fire. There are no planned fire drills. Security. These rooms here will not be locked until the whole building's locked at 6 o'clock. So think about your belongings. Don't leave precious belongings in the rooms around here. A little bit about registration. It's been done here at the front to save traipsing back to the hotel. So I think about 3:15 at the tea break then, you can register here, get your keys and sort out there if you stay over. Let me mention the shop and exhibition, and I will mention it a few times because I just wandered to that table this morning. Brilliant resources just to take, share and use. I picked up just one card. It's a prayer for those living alone. Brilliant little prayer on the back of that card. Other resources, changing lives, the inspirational stories of the work with people. Those two things that I've picked up so far. Great resources. Get to the exhibition and shop and get some resources to take away with you and use. The workbook. This has been brilliantly prepared, and I think this workbook we can take home with us and use for connections, also as reminders. There's a page for notes at the back, and you perhaps can jot down contacts and the rest of it there, as well as notes on what's said. But there's a full workbook there that we can take away with us. So thanks. Can we at this stage thank the organisers with Helen, who've done an absolutely brilliant job getting us here in the first place and preparing today. So let's start with a thanks. Thank you so much. Looking for people, so I think Father Paul, our National Spiritual Advisor, is actually delayed. I can't see him in the room. He's on his way, is he? Well, maybe we could ask him to pray with us a little bit later, but I think we should start with a few words of prayer now, and then perhaps move to our speaker. Our title is Building the Kingdom. And so to set the tone, there was a lovely line actually in the funeral of St. Vincent, the funeral oration of St. Vincent. Henri de Maupassant de Tours said this about St. Vincent: he just about transformed the face of the church, and that's the face of the world as well. Could we just reflect on that in quiet to set the tone for just 90 seconds, and then we'll start the formal conference. Thank you. And could you say the Gloria? Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Thank you. But with then start, and can I introduce Matt, who's a research fellow here at Loughborough. He's a long way to come across the grass. He's a sociologist, he's an expert in social policy, and he's involved in the Centre for Research in Social Policy. So he has his fingers on the structures of where we are, and we're going to invite Matt to lay out for us how he sees things now, and then we're going to ask Helen to give an SVP response. So can we give a warm welcome to Matt, and let's get on with it.
Thank you very much. I was just reflecting that you look a lot more attentive than the people I'm normally so let's hope that I managed to keep your attention. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'd say it was a pleasure to come and talk to you about poverty, but that's not such a pleasure. But to have the opportunity to set the scene for what you're going to talk about this weekend is an honour. Thank you. A very little bit about me, and then I'll move on to talking about poverty and living standards currently in the UK. So, I am a research fellow in the Centre for Research in Social Policy here at Loughborough. I've never been to this building. I've worked here for 13 years. So I don't think it was here 13 years ago, in fairness to me. We do an awful lot of work about living standards in the UK and have a flagship programme of research about minimum living standards that we've done in the UK and increasingly around the world. And I'll talk a little bit about that later this morning. So as I said, it's a delight to be here. What I'm going to talk about this morning is not comprehensive. I've been selective. It's guided by the things that I'm interested in. So what I'm not presenting is an exhaustive account of what poverty is like in the UK today. But I have picked out some key ideas and hopefully some challenges. Although I sense I'm very much preaching to the converted in all senses of that sentence this morning. There was a sociologist who I was a fan of when I was a student called Helen who did a lot of work with people who were considered to be outsiders. And he said that good social science pretty much told people what they already knew. So this morning I sense I may be pretty much telling you what a lot of you already know, but hopefully with some challenge in there. So, what is poverty? An overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to touch on what poverty is, how we define it, why we want to measure it, if it's useful to measure it, a look at who is currently considered to be poor, what that means, and then importantly to talk about the limits of those measures and the importance of stories. And I'll explain exactly what I mean when I get to that point. And finally, what can we do about poverty? I know that you're all already involved in doing things about poverty, but I'll end with my reflections on what I think we should be doing, the kinds of challenges that we should be involved in. So, to start, what is poverty? Often when I'm doing things like that, I like to consult my children and to ask them what they think I should be talking about. Often they are aware of the world in ways that we're not aware of the world and pick up on things that we're unaware of. So I asked my very nearly 7-year-old and my 9-year-old yesterday what they thought poverty was. Now they might be slightly more aware of these things than normal 9-year-olds and 7-year-olds because their dad is involved in these things, but when I asked them what poverty was, they both very quickly said having no food, having no money, having no house. And then we had a conversation about how that would feel, what that would mean to people in their everyday lives. And they were both, again, very clear that this would be upsetting. And they said that I should be talking about what poverty meant to people, not just how we measure it, but what it felt like. And I think they've kind of identified something key there, that in all of the talk about measurement and all of the talk about how many people are living in poverty, actually, what's really important is how that feels. So, what is poverty? In saying that poverty was about having no money and no food, they're kind of picking up on the fact that poverty is often seen as a lack of something. or being deprived of things. Being deprived of resources, being deprived of money, being deprived of housing, of food, of shelter, lots of things that we all take for granted. In more extreme ways, destitution is a word that's often associated with poverty. Having absolutely nothing, not even being able to eat, having nowhere to be, nowhere to call home. All of those things are about need, about what we need as individuals, and what we should be entitled to. Hardship is another way of talking about those things. As I said, I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted, but those are the kind of ways in which we can start to think about what poverty means and what the implications of poverty are for people living in society. I thought someone was encouraging me at the start to say that poverty didn't exist. I'm not going to say that poverty doesn't exist. I'm sure you'll all be aware that Philip Alston, the UN Special Rapporteur, was in the UK recently and looking at the state of our nation and made some fairly damning comments about the state of the UK and the shocking fact that as the 5th largest economy in the world, we currently have about 1.5 million people who've experienced destitution. That's quite a shocking fact. And yet, there are those who responded to what he said by saying, actually, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He came when he was here for a few days, and actually we're fine. There is no poverty. And there was a man recently from the Adam Smith Institute. I don't know if you're aware of the work of the Adam Smith Institute. They sometimes say things that are slightly controversial. He said, responding to Philip Alston, that Britain doesn't actually have any at all of what we call poverty. And it most certainly doesn't have any destitution. And what I'm saying this morning is a response to that, I think. We do have poverty. We do have what we can call poverty, and we certainly have what we can call destitution. Loughborough, where we are currently, in the Centre for Research in Social Policy here, we've done some work recently looking at child poverty levels and kind of estimating them. Where we are currently in Loughborough, over a quarter of children are currently growing up in poverty. The Institute for Fiscal Studies predict that by 2021, 40% of children in the UK will be living in poverty. As it's currently measured, with all of the problems with that, but 40%, nearly 1 in 2 children will be growing up in poverty in the 5th largest economy in the world. 67% of children currently who are in poverty are growing up in a house where there's work. There are lots of myths and lots of stories in the media about poverty and worklessness going hand in hand, but increasingly the story of poverty is one of in-work poverty. There were some headlines earlier this week, I don't know if people saw them, it may even have been yesterday actually, about the increase in in-work poverty. We know that child poverty has long-lasting effects. It's not just about the day-to-day living, about not knowing whether you've got enough food to have for breakfast, or whether you're going to have a meal when you get home from school, or being able to do the kinds of things that your peers at school are able to do. It's not just about those things, it has consequences. And it has consequences for the whole of your life. Children who grow up in poverty are far less likely to succeed, if that's the right word, at GCSEs, and to kind of achieve education. Child poverty also has a cost, estimated to be about £29 billion a year, which is an awful lot of money. Child poverty costs us as a country £29 billion each year. Homelessness, again often associated with poverty and destitution. Crisis, the homeless charity each year produced a monitor of homelessness in the UK, and in England they estimate that rough sleeping has increased by 132% since 2010. That's quite shocking. And a lot of that increase is outside London, not within inside London. The National Audit Office, who looks at homelessness more broadly, say that they estimate that homelessness increased by 60% between 2011 and 2017. Shelter estimate that about 300,000 people in Britain are now homeless, and about 25,000 at any time are sleeping rough or on public transport. And that's more than twice what the government currently estimates. 600 people in 2007 who were homeless died homeless, and that has increased dramatically over time as well. Food bank use, I know you've got a session on food poverty later in your meeting. Food bank use has increased almost fourfold since 2012-13. At the height of the financial crisis, there were 29 food banks in the UK. Now, there are over 2,000. So in less than a decade, we've gone from 29 food banks to over 2,000. Single parents, most of whom are women, are more than twice as likely as anyone else to experience persistent poverty, and that means that they have long periods where they are not only below a line that is deemed to be the poverty line, but are experiencing, they are deprived materially. They don't have everything that they need in order to do lots of the things that we all take for granted. Nearly half of the people in poverty in the UK currently, about 7 million, are from families where someone has a disability. So that's a very gloomy picture, I think, of the country that we currently live in. And you know, I think it's important to kind of to have that as a context for what I'm going to, the rest of what I'm going to say. What is poverty? So I've just given you a whole load of numbers that tell us about the way in which people are living, that tell us about people's living standards, that give us a kind of an insight into the way in which people's lives are at the moment. But how do we measure poverty? Why do we want to measure poverty? What does it even mean to be poor? It is a term that has lots and lots of different meanings, as we saw at the start. Peter Townsend, not the guitarist from the Who, not renowned for his academic work. Peter Townsend has been key within the UK in shaping the definition of what is called relative poverty. So, absolute poverty is one way in which we can understand poverty, and the UN defined that as lacking the basic necessities of life. So, not having food, not having clothes, not having shelter. And much was done to kind of eradicate that kind of poverty within the UK. And this led a whole lot of people to suggest that actually we didn't have poverty anymore. There was no such thing as poverty. Peter Townsend was amongst those who were arguing that actually poverty was about more than just lacking those essentials. It was about not being able to participate. And it was about being excluded. That definition, which is often quoted when people are talking about poverty in the UK, basically says that if you as an individual, as a household, lack the resources to eat the food, to do the kinds of things, to have the kinds of living conditions that are customary, that are seen as the norm, if you will, then if they're living below that, then they are in poverty. We can understand them to be in poverty. And the consequence of that is that they're excluded. They're excluded from ordinary patterns, customs, and activities. So key in that definition is the idea of resources. So poverty is about resources. And that can mean any number of things. as I'll show you in a minute, it generally is interpreted to mean one thing, but it can mean all sorts of things. What are the resources that we have? Arguably one of the problems, and I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but arguably one of the problems with the way in which we've thought about and tried to address poverty is that we focused too much on income and not enough on what people are lacking in other areas or don't have in other areas, or what they do have and what can help. So it's about resources and it's about being excluded. So, at its simplest, poverty is a lack of resources that leads to exclusion. How do we measure it? Generally, in the UK and in many other developed countries, we look at income. So, the first question is really, are we looking at absolute poverty or are we looking at relative poverty? Relative poverty positions me relative to everyone else in the society in which I live. So where do I sit relative to the person who lives next door to me, or to the bloke I sit next to at the pub, or and so on? Where am I in that order of people? Absolute poverty, as I said, is seen as lacking those necessities, those basic necessities, but not just about income. It's about access to kind of social services as well. In the UK, we generally talk about relative poverty. The government have confused things recently by talking about absolute poverty, but they don't mean what many people mean when they talk about absolute poverty. I can explain that, but it's rather technical. Yes, but just to confuse matters, every year when they release their poverty statistics, they talk about levels of absolute poverty. They don't mean absolute poverty in the way that we often understand it. They mean it in a different sense. They mean it in a sense that relates to income. And the focus of UK poverty measures has been on, and continues to be, on income. If you have an income that's less than average, you are, or a lot less than average, you are considered to be in poverty. And I'll talk through some of what that means in terms of who is poor in a minute. If we are interested in relative poverty, an alternative to looking at income is to look at whether or not people are materially deprived. What does that mean? That means they don't have the things, they're not able to have the things that are seen as norms, that are kind of normal standards within society. So if you're not able to heat your home, for instance, or have 3 meals a day, those kind of things that we all probably take for granted and see as, as representing a kind of basic living standard that everyone should be able to have. So we can count the people who are materially deprived as well. Importantly, and often what doesn't feature in the ways in which poverty is measured or talked about, is people who are socially deprived. What do I mean by that? People who are lonely, people who don't have relationships, people who live their time on their own, or are not able to kind of participate with others in activities as we are. They're not able to take part in society. As I said, in the UK, we tend to talk about poverty in relation to income. Why? It's a good question. Partly, I think, because we can measure it. In the 1990s, there was a group of academics who got together in Europe to argue for a unified definition of poverty across countries. They were critical of what they saw as the unwillingness of other countries to introduce this cross-country measure that would mean that we could make all of these interesting comparisons between different countries They were very clear that poverty was about income, and that whilst there were some other bits that you could associate with poverty, actually what we should really be measuring is income and where people sit relative to a certain proportion of average income. And they were clear that all countries should introduce these international measures of these basic concepts, that being income, and take immediate steps to improve the accepted meanings, measurement and explanation of poverty. They were rejecting a kind of fuller definition of poverty that included some of those other things, that included material deprivation, that included social deprivation, but was about something you could measure. So if we look at how many people are below that 60% of median income, which is what we do in this country, if we do that in the UK, then we can also do that in Ireland, and we can do that in Bulgaria, and we can do that in Chile. There's no link between those countries. You know, we can look at it globally, and we can say, actually, you know, the UK is doing okay relative to Bulgaria. Does it mean anything? Does it mean the same thing to live below 60% of average income in Bulgaria as it does in, I don't know why I chose Bulgaria, so I'm going to run with it, in Bulgaria as it does in the UK? Does that look the same? Does that result in the same experience? Does that result in the same living standard? No. Is it something we can measure? Yes. But does that make it the right measure? No. I've given away the punchline there. We are, to a certain extent, stuck with the measure we have. One of the things I think is very clear, or I should make clear, is that whilst it is talked about as a measure, it's not a measure, it's an indicator. It indicates levels of poverty. It doesn't measure levels of poverty. According to this indicator, 14 million people in the UK are living below the poverty line after they've paid for their housing. That's key because housing can be a big drain on resources, particularly financial resources. So it's important to look at where people are in terms of what they have left after they've put a roof over their head. So that 14 million people appears to be, you know, a fairly accurate count of everyone who's living in poverty in the UK. It's not. It's a count of people who don't have an income that's above 60% of the median. Does that mean that they are all living in poverty? Not necessarily. Does that mean that they would all define themselves as living in poverty? Not necessarily. There will be many people who live below that line who are very happy with actually the resources they have. There are people living above that line who would feel deprived. Is it useful? Yes, in as much as it tells us what's happening over time. But is it useful? It's not useful to get hung up on the number, to focus on the fact that there are 14 million people. 14 million people in the UK is 22% of the population. And that's broken down into 4.1 million children, 2 million pensioners, and 8 million working age adults. Just to put that children one in context, and I know I just said the numbers aren't useful. That's 9 in a classroom of 30 children. 9 children living in poverty out of a classroom of 30. Who is poor? I'm always slightly reluctant to use charts, but they do show you what's happened over time. And as I said, that's how principally I think they're useful. The green dotted line there is everyone, so you can see that in 17, 18, that's the latest year for which we have data about people's incomes, 22% of all individuals in the UK are considered to be in poverty. But you can see that that's actually kind of hides some of those key differences. The yellow line is working age adults. They make up most people in the country, and therefore actually the proportion who are living in poverty is fairly similar. as it is for all individuals. But you can see there that 30% of all children are living below that line in the UK. And that's, you can see that things got better for a while, that there were policies that were put in place that reduced that number. And at its lowest, it was around 27%. Still quite high, but lower than its starting point in 94 or 95. You can also see that over time, actually, a lot has been done to address pensioner poverty and to improve the living standards of pensioners. You see from that they started in 94 and 95 at about 28%, and currently 16% of pensioners are living below that line. So this is useful in as much as it tells us, or gives us an indication of the trends. I mentioned in-work poverty. One of the key trends over recent years has been an increase in the numbers of people who are in work, and that can mean, the definition means any work. So if you're in a household that has part-time work, or where one person works and another doesn't, or full-time work, for the first time ever since we started counting these things. So it kind of 2008, 2009, it was about 50-50 of those in work and those out of work. But since 12, 13, consistently, there are a higher proportion of those who are deemed to be in poverty have some work. So more people out of that whole group who are below that line are in work compared to those out of work. And this was happening at a time when we were being told, and we've been told for a long time, that work is the best route out of poverty. And it's clear from this that something is not working there, that there are structures, there are things that need to change in order to change how that chart looks. So, measurement has its limits. An academic called David Pearshow, writing in 1987, said that basically anyone who studied poverty had a kind of moral responsibility to ultimately make the world a better place. He said the study of poverty is only ultimately justifiable if it influences individual and social attitudes and action. And he was kind of railing against there were ongoing spats between competing academics who had different ways of understanding poverty. And his point was that this is all very interesting, but unless our study of poverty actually does anything to change the world, we're kind of wasting our time. And he compared those academics to Nero, who fiddled, I believe, while Rome burned. He said it was a squabble, it was voyeuristic, it didn't change the world. Robert Chambers, who was a guy who worked, maybe still does, the Institute of Development Studies, wrote a book called The Voices of the Poor, I think that's what it's called. And he, again, was very critical of measurement and the obsession with kind of counting those who were poor. And he said, poverty becomes what has been measured. Poverty becomes what has been measured. It's divorced from its reality, it's divorced from lived experience, it becomes a number. When you see 14 million, you say, oh, 14, that's a lot of people, isn't it? What does that mean, though? What does that mean for those 14 million people? And we become obsessed with the measure, but we're measuring what can be measured. We're not necessarily measuring people's experiences. We're not listening. We're not, engaging people in a conversation about what poverty is like. So I think there is a unnecessarily long sentence, or big words, the tyranny of quantification. I think in our desire to quantify the world, we lose out on the richness and the power of description, the power of stories to affect policy, to change actually the material circumstances that people find themselves in a desire to count things, in a desire to have better measures of poverty. I don't know if people are aware, there was a commission that's been running for the past couple of years called the Social Metrics Commission in the UK, who tasked themselves with coming up with a new measure of poverty, one that better reflected poverty, or counted it better, essentially. They've come up with a new measure that's just as hard to understand as the existing one, if not harder. Yes, it includes some other things that we can count better, but essentially, it's just another thing that we can measure. Does it tell us any more about what it feels like to be poor? Does it tell us any more about what people really need? No. It's another way of counting, another way of not displacing the problem, but not necessarily doing anything to tackle it. There's nothing wrong necessarily with targets. Labour established a target to reduce child poverty when they first came into power in '97, taken on by successive governments. The problem with that is that you miss targets, I think. Maybe you don't always miss targets, but government often does. And in the pursuit of that target, again, you're not hearing what people are saying. You're not listening to people. You are pursuing a target which is set against a measure. It's a number. You're not empowering people. You're not talking to the people for whom not eating every day is their normal experience, is their norm. You're not listening to them. And ultimately, poverty indicators, because that's what they are, they're not measures, they're indicators. They tell us nothing about what life is like below what actually is a fairly arbitrary line. There was a discussion when the UK and other European countries decided to define relative poverty as being below 60% of the median, about where that line should be. And had it been drawn at 55 or 40 or 70, then the idea we have about the scale of poverty would be very different. But it would still be talked about as poverty. So that line isn't in and of itself meaningful. And it doesn't tell us anything about what life is like. So, 16% of pensioners are living below a poverty line. What does that mean? What does that look like? If you're a pensioner who's deemed to be living in poverty, what's your everyday life like? If you're one of the 30% of all children who are living in a household below poverty, what does that look like? There are some big questions there that poverty measures do not answer. I've been doing some research recently with some people who live in housing association properties, and we've been talking to them about affordability. I met a woman earlier this week who had applied for employment support allowance. I won't go into the intricacies of the benefit system, but had been deemed fit for work and had all of her benefits cut, pretty much. She had £7 a week for a few weeks. She was suicidal. The thing that stopped her committing suicide was her daughter getting married. This despite the fact that 2 years previously she had qualified as an occupational therapist, had been in a well-paid job with the NHS, and had been unable to work because she discovered late in life that she had Asperger's. That's the real experience of poverty. That's someone we need to sit and listen to and say, well, you know, what can we do? What would help? She was very fortunate, actually. As a Mormon, Mormons are encouraged to store food. I did not know this. But that's the reason she survived, is because she had lots and lots of tinned food in her house. And she had a family who were supportive. Had she not had that, what would have happened? A few years ago, I was doing some research on debt, and I visited a man in Manchester who had been a Man United fan and had followed them around the globe, pretty much, in their success, when they were successful. So, years not far ago. What, 99? He'd visited, he'd followed them across Europe, and he'd paid for his friends to do that. He had a well-paying job and a marriage and a happy life, and then when the money ran out and he couldn't get any more credit, his friends abandoned him, his marriage finished, he doesn't see his children. When I visited him, he had one light bulb that he moved around the house, and he didn't turn it on when I was there, and we sat in the dark and chatted because he couldn't afford to put any money in the meter. Knowing that there are 14 million people who are living in poverty doesn't tell you anything about his life, doesn't tell you anything about his experience. Anyway, I'm aware of the time, I should press on. So Philip Holston said, statistics alone cannot capture the full picture of poverty in the United Kingdom. And I think if there's one thing you take away from what I've said this morning, it's that. Statistics alone cannot capture the full picture. Poverty is complex. Poverty is relational. It's about power. It's tied up in relationships between individuals, between the state and individuals, between different groups of people. It's multidimensional. It's not just about money. There are many poverties, not just poverty. Poverty of opportunity, poverty of aspiration, poverty of access. How often do we think about the fact that people are often stuck in villages because there's no transport or they haven't got any transport? That is a form of poverty, and we need to have a far more complex understanding of what poverty is. Poverty is relative. I think it can be useful to think about it in relative terms, but there is an absolute core, and there are undoubtedly people in the UK today who do not have what they need in order to have those things that we all just take for granted. Waking up and having breakfast, going to a wardrobe and getting some clothes to put on. Those things that we all, without even thinking about it, take for granted. Many of these different ways of thinking about poverty end up being about measurement. When I think they should be, and I use should intentionally rather than could, I think they should be about stories, about people's own experience, about people's own lives. Poverty is something that's experienced, it's lived and experienced. It becomes tangled up and enmeshed in the stories, the bigger stories of our lives. And I think it's really important that we listen to those stories. Why? Stories are complex. They capture the complexity of life. They're not reductive. They don't reduce everything to a number. People are complicated. We are complicated. I am complicated. Theories are helpful, but actually, real life is messy and complicated and difficult. And understanding that and taking the time to listen to people arguably does a lot more than knowing that there are 14 million people who are living below the line. Stories deepen our understanding of the world and of others, and they encourage change, I think. And they connect us to other people. Knowing there are 14 million people in poverty, I can go to sleep and not worry about that. Knowing that the guy 2 doors down doesn't have any food makes it a very different kind of conversation. But I think it's really important to hold on to the fact that poverty is not the story. It's not all of the story. It's part of people's story. And it needn't be the end of the story. I'm going to skim that slide. So I was just going to talk about me. So I won't do that. I was going to talk about the work that we do here, but I think I'll move on to my concluding slides. What can we do about poverty and living standards? It's a challenge for a whole load of us who essentially make a living out of studying poverty. There are a great number of people who are doing very nicely for themselves, having studied poverty all of their lives, and I'm doing quite nicely for myself. So I include myself in that. But what can we do? There's a challenge almost daily to not just talk about it, but to do something about it. The reality is there are many, many different actors, and many of them can or have a role to play in doing something about equality. I think government has a key role to play through policy. I'm not going to get too political. That's not my role. It's an objective academic. But there have been policy changes recently that have had an adverse effect on many, many people. And I'm sure that many of you are aware of the consequences of those policies. Policy is a useful tool to change people's lives, but that policy has to be good policy, which includes a real commitment to do something about the living standards of people, not just aiming at a target. And working with people, not doing things to them. Policy too often does stuff to people, rather than working with them and asking them what they need, what they think. Community and faith organisations, many faiths, all faiths, have within them, a kind of commitment to work with, look after, care for people who find themselves in difficult circumstances. And I think actually all too often over the past few years, it's fallen to community and faith organisations to pick up the pieces, to step in where there used to be a safety net, to provide food parcels, to provide that kind of support that communities once used to provide. And I think there's a fundamental kind of purpose for community and faith organisations. We need to rebuild community. The focus on the individual and the individualisation of poverty, making it about you as an individual and what you've done wrong, and you're in poverty because of this and this and this, nothing to do with the structures that exist in society. We need to challenge that and say, no, communities used to look after each other. And there are still examples of that, but we need to do things to encourage that. We need policy that encourages and rebuilds community, not encourages individuals to act alone or in their own interests. You and me? When I was at school, I'm sure there was a green cross code video that encouraged me to stop and listen. And that's useful when crossing the road. But I also think it's fundamentally important when we're interested in and studying poverty. It's so easy to not stop, look around us, and listen to those people for whom life is really hard, and find out why, and learn from them, and not think that we have the answers because we're not in that situation. So remember the green cross code. I wanted to end with Micah 6:8. Poverty is an injustice, and I think we are kind of called to confront injustice. I think it's really important that we do that. There are a variety of different ways in which we can do that. Yes, practically we can provide support and we can meet needs, but I think we need to be looking higher, looking at the structures that mean people are living in those circumstances. We need to be compassionate and have humanity for those who find themselves in challenging circumstances. But again, aware of the fact that those people are there not necessarily because of what they've done, or mostly not because of what they've done, but because of the structures in society that make things very, very difficult for them. And walking humbly, having that humility, taking that time to engage with people, to understand, and not to assume that because a person looks a certain way or because a person lives in a particular way that they are, as we may assume they are. So, yes. So, in summary, and very briefly, counting people who are poor has a purpose. But my challenge to myself, and I think maybe it's not a challenge to you, maybe it's just to myself, is for me to do more of this, to stop and to look and to listen and to look around me and to engage and to find ways to challenge the structures that mean that people in this country, and I haven't even talked about the other countries in the world, people in this country are living in ways that we can all agree are not the ways in which we want people to live. Thank you.
Could have said with about quick fire questions of fact, not an analysis of positive. We can move on to it during the week, the next 2 days. Certainly, please.
Matt, thank you for sharing with us this statistics. What extent does mental health underpin what has been experienced?
So to what extent does
Mental health
underpin? I think what's certainly true is that many people who would be considered to be in poverty would also, there are mental health problems that are associated with being in poverty. The direction of that relationship, so what causes which, or if there is indeed a causal relationship, I think is unclear. That goes somewhere to the question.
You have a quick fire question on that?
Yeah, very quick one. When we're dealing with people with benefit problems, it seems to us that there's almost conspiracy going on to make things as hard as possible. Is that something you recognise?
Yes, if we're being quick fire, yes. As I said, I didn't want to be too political. I think if you look at what's happened to the welfare state and historically, the purpose of the welfare state was to provide a safety net. And that safety net has been systematically eroded over the past few years, and that has meant that lots of people have found themselves in awful circumstances. And part of that, I think, is a culture that has made it far more difficult to access state support.
Would you agree with me that people's attitude, the public attitude to those on benefits, has actually changed considerably? People used to use the word scroungers about people on benefits. I haven't heard that word for a long, long time. As if the public in general recognise that some people do have to have benefits, and rather than disparage them.
I think that very much depends on what newspaper you read. That's a genuine answer. It's not that. I think there remains a core of people who really would think that most people on benefits are scroungers, and I still encounter that. So I spend a lot of my time talking to members of the public about those kind of things, and you still encounter those kind of entrenched attitudes. Is it changing? I don't know. I think you're probably better placed to answer that question than me.
Quick fire question of fact, if I may.
Yep.
The figures you quoted, 14 million living in poverty, 8 million of these are working families. Where were these figures obtained from? Were these the official government?
Yes. Yeah. So every year the government release some figures called the households below average income, which is otherwise known as the poverty statistics. So that's they're collected by or on behalf of the government.
So in reality, the figure is probably significantly higher.
Depends how you measure it. It's based on the best information we have about people's incomes. So according to that measure, those figures are the best we have.
I'll take one last one there.
Matt, I think you said that child poverty costs 29 billion a year. If we could dig into that and identify where those costs arise, I think we'd be a long way towards a solution.
So that's based on a report that we did at the centre at where I work, and it's available on our website. So it kind of sets out what those costs are. Some of them are short-term, some of them are kind of long-term. So because we know that growing up poor has long-term consequences in terms of people's outcomes later in life. So if you're interested, it's on our.
Thank you.
One very last one, please.
Yes, thank you very, very much for your presentation. One of the things that was evident as you were talking is that working people experience poverty. I think it's very clear.
Yeah. And it's been, it's a growing problem for lots and lots of reasons. Insecurity at work, precarious, zero hours contracts, but also, actually over the past few years, incomes haven't kept up with costs.
Okay, I'm going to move on, I'm afraid, and this conversation will continue. Just one thing, Matt, on your, at the Centre for Research in Social Policy, are those graphs on the website, or can they be on the website? There's linked some of those graphs tell the story, particularly about in-work poverty now. Could you share those with us and we could take them back to our conference groups?
They're not, but I'm happy for you
To use them.
to share the slides, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. Is that okay? Then we can take the information back and discuss it locally. That's what I'm keen to do. And on that note, can we thank Matt? The great Saint Oscar Romero said, to build the kingdom, the church needs to do two things: tell the truth about reality and accompany the people. And I think Matt's given us a brilliant insight into the truth about the reality of the world we're in, but also invited us through the story-shaped world to accompany the people. So Matt, can we thank you? You're welcome to stay for more of the conference up there. And perhaps we could say, if you keep in touch with us, and can we keep a relationship going, because your work is valuable to what we do. So Matt, can we thank you sincerely? Helen, could you perhaps give us now a response on delivering our mission as SVP? What can we do in response to that challenge from that?
Thank you, John. Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. It's brilliant to see you all here. Thank you so much for everyone for making the effort to come. I think we're going to have a really inspiring couple of days, and I'm sure I'll be more inspired by it than anybody. So absolutely brilliant to see you all here. And I could feel the energy and the inspiration and the chat as we all came into this room. So it's brilliant to be with SVP members, staff, Vincentians, friends, and like-minded people. So really happy to have you here. I shamelessly sat there when John thanked me for organising everything this morning, because I haven't organised anything at all. I took the credit, and if it all goes right, then I'm happy to continue. If not, it's Elizabeth Palmer who sat at the front. No, I haven't organised anything. Elizabeth and her team have done a fantastic job. More of that later. Thank you very much to Matt. He's now gone. Oh, he's there. Hello, Matt. There you are. Good. Expert at the back. That's very good. For talking about what we're all about in the SVP, combating poverty. That's what we do. And those key ideas of how poverty looks today and what we should be doing about it. So I want to talk about what we are trying to do about it, and take you very briefly through some of the things we've done in the last couple of years. How do we as SVP members build the kingdom around us? So it's that amazing mix of common spirituality, action and friendship that we all experience in our conferences. I've got two conference members here today, Luna, Becky, give me a wave. They are just brilliant. I love what we do in our conference and how we work together to help those people most in need, and we always do it with a smile and a laugh and a prayer. So thank you for being here and for inspiring me always. So that heady mix that we all experience, we need to spread that out. We need to spread it further so that more people can join our journey and we can help more people. Matt talked about two things: lack of resources and exclusion has been absolutely key to people experiencing poverty. Now, you all know you turn up with your bags of food at people's doors. We're trying to counteract that lack of resource. You organise a fridge to be delivered, there's a bed delivered, somebody's buying things in the shop. That's what we're about. And befriending people, one-to-one relationships, is absolutely what the SVP does. And we do that to try and counter isolation and exclusion. And we are needed more than ever in order to be able to do that. Oh, I have to click things, sorry. Here we go. Oh, there we go. So our mission as all SVP members know, to seek and find those in need, to help them in a spirit of justice, and to tackle the causes of poverty where we can. So there are a few things to that. Seek and find. This is an action. This is what we do. We are supposed to, and we do, go out and find those people who need our help. And you will be hearing in some of the seminars about the way conferences are doing that in different ways. And we engage them in a personal relationship. That is really, really important. We're not a food bank where you turn up and collect your food. We have a personal relationship with those people that we need to help. We stand by their side. Help them in a spirit of justice. Again, action. We help them. We offer help. But we do it using our values and with a spirit of justice, which is the kind of thing that Matt was talking about earlier. We have respect. We recognise their dignity. We recognise Christ in the face of the poor. And tackle the causes of poverty where we can. I think this is particularly evident in some of our support centres, where they are welcoming refugees, offering education, training and advice, and their work is absolutely key. We certainly need to do more to tell those stories that we know about in order to be more of a voice, allowing those people in need to be able to speak up for themselves. And I think that's a challenge for us going forward. And certainly, as we want to move towards greater financial security, we would like to be able to spend some of that money on influencing social justice issues, and I think we should be doing that. So keeping the society relevant. So our mission today is the same as it was for Blessed Frederick and those amazing young men in Paris 200 years ago. However, how we go about it is very different. The world has changed and it needs us to change. We are called upon to change. And actually, we are called upon by our very rule. Our rule 1.6, adaptation to a changing world. So we're all asked, faithful to the spirit of its founders, the society constantly strives for renewal, adapting to changing world conditions. It seeks to be ever aware of the changes that occur in human society and the new types of poverty that may be identified or anticipated. It gives priority to the poorest of the poor and those who are rejected by society. So we need look no further than our rule to know that we have to change and adapt to meet today's needs. And also, in true St. Vincent fashion, we need to plan. So the poor suffer less from a lack of generosity than from a lack of organisation. You'll all know that quote from St. Vincent. And it's true. We have to organise ourselves well. We have to have the right structures in place so that we have to be trained, so that we know we can offer the best service. At the international meeting I attended last week, the SVP International Spiritual Advisor, Andreas Motto, said, out-to-date service to the poor will always be deficient. It's not good enough. We have to do the best we can. They deserve the best that we can possibly give them. Well, there we are. It was St. Vincent. Just as well as I said it was. Those of you who read the Vincentian Concern avidly, whenever it comes out, as all of you do, I'm sure, will have seen this. So since our last national meeting, you have a new board, continuing on the excellent work of the board led so well previously by Adrian. Was Adrian here? Oh, Adrian's here. Hello, Adrian. And I'd like now to thank the board members who work with me and with the senior staff for their diligence, commitment, intelligence, and lively debates. If they could be a bit less lively sometimes, that would be good. But they're absolutely brilliant, and they do a sterling job on the part of all the members and the people that we help. So thank you. So the issues the board were facing were fairly obvious. Falling church attendance, ageing membership, new types of poverty, insufficient funds. I think it's probably obvious to everybody what the issues we now need to address. And so we broke it down. You'll have seen this is Elizabeth's pictorial representation of what we're trying to do. Money, members and mission. We need to address these three areas so that with the help of all of these people on the right, we end up with delighted beneficiaries. We actually make a difference. and that's what we're aiming for. So again, you will have seen the 6 pillars of our strategic plan, and I'm certainly not going to take you through all of it, but you'll see that the strategic goal at the end of these 5 years is to deliver a sustainable, well-resourced organisation which is responsive to need, values-led, innovative and collaborative, and whose members are actively engaged in a local, national and global Vincentian movement, united in prayer, action and mission. So that is what the board thinks we should be aiming to achieve. Hope you all agree. So you'll see, I'm not sure if you can read it, but you will have seen them before, the justification for these 6 pillars from scripture or from Vincentian spirituality. And if you read them, I think you'll like them. I won't go through them because of time. But I will just share with you some of the things we have put in place to try and further this strategic plan and these pillars, and Elizabeth at the end of the 2 days will talk about some of our plans for the future. So, empowering our membership. The person who's been running around trying to make sure everybody's got everything they need and organise everything is John Cornwall. And that's him, if you haven't met him. Just wave, John. Where are you? Outside running around organising. He's got another job to do. So the board felt that we needed to have an executive level head of membership because that was missing. We needed to prioritise our members and offer support to our members because we have fantastic members, 9,000 to 10,000 of you, absolutely brilliant, but we can't sit there expecting them to go on forever. That's just not going to happen. They need new recruits, youth, training, practical help. Most of all, they need inspiration. Absolutely need inspiration. John is inspirational, and if you meet him, I'm sure you will agree. If you have problems that you'd like him to solve, I'm sure he will, because he's very good like that. It may take him a while, and he is, I think, a real asset to the society. So I hope you get to meet him. Because the joy and challenge of the SVP is that we all work locally. We work locally within our conferences, we make decisions locally, and yet they are supported by this national and international structure. We're part of this wider Vincentian family. So the joy of that is the independence that it allows. We can sit around our conference table and make decisions about who's getting money and what we're doing and how we need to offer more help. The challenge is that being a national charity brings responsibility in relation to legislative requirements that the trustees have to enforce or risk censure, sanctions, prison, death, all these kind of things that they threaten us with whenever we look like we're not doing what we should be doing. But this creates a tension, obviously, between the locality and the centre, but we hope that it's a healthy tension that we can build on and still have that fantastic core of support, but locality, because that's what the SVP does brilliantly. So, head of membership, that's one of the things. Regional membership development officers, this was under the previous board, piloted a scheme to see if we could have paid membership development officers to help with recruitment and other things that central councils might need. And this board has reviewed their work, agreed that they are doing a really good job. The statistics add up, and so we would like to expand that to other central councils where we can. New resources, you may have seen some of these. So Anne Harris and her brilliant membership development team have been working on new resources that conferences can use, and we really encourage you to do that. And the Faith in Action programme, aimed at all new members and old members, because it's always really, really good, is being rolled out across the country. So we need to be trained, we need to be the best we can. So the second pillar was extending our reach. So the conference model is fantastic, and we love it. It doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody wants to fit into that conference model. So there are some new ways we're looking at to enable other people to widen it out, so other people can join our mission as and where that is possible within the room. So John was contacted by a parish priest in Luton, I think it was, who said, could you come and do an address because I would like to have the SVP in my parish. And when he got there, actually what the priest wanted was actually what I want is for my whole parish to be members of the SVP. I want this to be an SVP parish. And that is actually what is going to happen. So with the encouragement and blessing of this fantastic priest, the whole of the parish has agreed to be, oh there he is, John gives a wave, talking about you. The whole of the parish has agreed to be, you can correct me when I get any of this wrong, has agreed to be part of the SVP. And they've got various groups, some will be out there visiting, some will do specific work, some will simply help every now and then, some will give money, but it's a brilliant model. And we think that in a second parish as well, there's interest.
Second parish we're
Yeah.
talking like that, and there's already 2 others
Yeah.
on the way, so
It's a brilliant
hopefully this will
idea.
come.
That's a really, really good.
I think it's a trend now, which is good.
So that's exciting. Our 1833 development, we carried out a review, we had some funding to carry out a comprehensive review of our university students and our young adults, 1833. That review led by Teresa Kehoe, who will be talking about the seminars later. See? There she is, okay, in yellow. It was a very extensive review and has come to the conclusion that we absolutely have to find different ways of encouraging young people to join our mission, and she will be talking about that later. So do please talk to Teresa about that. Our community support projects continue to develop. Our support centres are really important hubs for people, and all of them have been finding new ways they can carry out our mission. So we have in Newcastle the lunch club for people who don't otherwise have a meal is going from strength to strength. Just as an example, in St Vincent's they will be running holiday hungry clubs for those children who usually have a school meal but actually their parents find it difficult to feed them during the school holidays. And in our Brighton Centre Tower House, for those most isolated elderly people, they are running a variation on dementia clubs and friendship cafes. There are things happening all the time. Twinage, we're absolutely honoured to have Johnson Varghese here and Lito, I'm going to say your name right. Might be able to say your name right. Where are you? There you are, over there. Lito Palathingal, got it? Who are going to be able to tell you the story of poverty in India and what the SVP does and what your help does to them. So we continue to support our Twinage programs, and we are trying to instill greater communication and channels of reporting, and that is an absolute priority, and we've talked about it a lot over the last few days. Collaboration. We are part of this fantastic Vincentian family, and we want to do more with our fellow Vincentians. We also want to collaborate with anybody else who thinks like us and wants to work with us. I think it's really important. If we can do it better with somebody else, then we should do it better with somebody else. It's our absolute duty. And you will hear from Mark later, who's at the back, Mark McGreevy from DePaul, who will be talking about the 13 Houses initiative that we are very much involved with. And youth, you'll be able to talk to the youth team. Moira is at the back and everyone's here, but we are continuing to invest in our youth programme. Anyone who went to Westminster Cathedral last week to the Mini Vinnies Mass, where there were, how many Mini Vinnies were there? 800. 800 Mini Vinnies. All these young Vincentians there with the bishop, having a Mass, celebrating together, and that is really remarkable. And I hope they've taken away a lot of inspiration from that. So that's something we really need to continue, and we will. Embracing innovation. You will, there are various seminars on these matters, so please join in and try and learn from this. And this is all about conference innovation. All of these things have come from conferences, and the board and national office have run with them and supported them. So that's a brilliant model. So the prison conference initiatives, Ian, who's here, just gone out to meet somebody, has started one in Hindley Prison, and Anne is working in Manchester as well. And not only is this about prison visiting, which is really hugely important, they've actually started conferences in the prisons themselves. I think in Anne's case it involves the prisoners who are members of the conference and support each other. And in Ian's case it's certainly the staff who joined in the conference. So that's a fantastic model that we are trying to support and replicate. Because there's absolutely no doubt about it, prisoners are one of those who are most isolated and most in need. Prisoners and those coming out of prison. And we have a duty to do what we can to help them. I read a quote from Carl Catamole, I think it was yesterday, who writes a blog called The Banged Up Bible. And he's an ex-prisoner, and it's his guide to surviving in prison. And he said, once someone's humanity is gone, it's a void to be filled by drugs. Simple as that. So what these conferences do, what our members do when they go into prisons, is try and keep that humanity alive. And that's really important. This is our new home. This is the first of our 13 houses in the UK. This is a house of multiple occupation, which is what HMO stands for, in East Anglia. And this is now an SVP project. It was started at the initiative of the Central Council President in East Anglia, Michael, who is here and will be talking later at one of the seminars, as a response to homelessness. They needed emergency accommodation in that area. And so they stepped in collaboration with another charity and ran a house, offering that SVP support around it. They lost the house because of various reasons, and we have now stepped in to buy this one. And this is going to be our first 13 house. And the conference will do all the wraparound care for those people who are in that house. The Greenhouse Project, again, this is a project from Ian Kempsell, who you can talk to later. This is about going into a school where there is high deprivation and taking out those children who are really suffering and who are just disrupted and trying to give them a different start. And the SVP has been supporting in that. They have also started a conference in the school, and a conference made up of conference members, teachers, support staff, so that they can offer a different kind of help through the SVP mechanism. Supporting young people leaving care. So this is my conference. So as always happens when I step down as conference president, you get somebody much better who comes in and does things in a different way. So our conference president, Nuala, absolutely thought we should be going out and doing more to find people in need. And she contacted the Islington young carers, was it? Leaving care team, thank you, to see if we could help them. And again, we're going to be talking about that in one of the seminars. But they are people who really, really need our help and support. And they're everywhere. Every council will have a leaving care team. It's open to anybody to go and say, how can we help you? Okay. Securing financial sustainability so that we can continue with this mission and do it in the best way we possibly can, so we can embrace that innovation. So under the previous board and adopted by this board, we are going to be running a fundraising campaign, because running an organisation like the SVP takes funding and strong financial management. So we're hugely grateful to the members, conferences, shops, donors who allow us to continue to function. But this major fundraising campaign, which is going to be led by Ken Medine, who you can talk to about it later, we hope is going to give us financial sustainability into the future. We will be able to invest it so that we have money coming in. That means we can continue, hopefully ad infinitum. We have to say big thanks and keep in our prayers the Damasio family and Mr. Damasio, who has very kindly left us a legacy which will initiate the start of this fundraising campaign and put us very firmly on our way. So we're very grateful for that. And we have started a programme of expanding our retail programme. So our shops are brilliant, that we want them to continue being that presence in the high street, to offer affordable goods to all those people who need it, but we also want them to contribute, and it's a source of income, and good shops will create income as well. So we've been putting in place strong management and structures with a view to expanding our retail so that this also becomes a source of income into the future. Oh, there we are, sorry. I wondered why I just said Bangor Shop. There's Kate in front of the Bangor Shop. which is great. Opened in May 2019, is that right? Brilliant. Excellent. So build the brand. Why do we need to build the brand? We're SVP people. We do everything quietly and nobody knows about it, and that's the way we should do it. Yes, that's what we really, really like about the SVP, but unless people know who we are, we won't know who needs help. We won't be able to tell the stories that Matt was talking about earlier, because nobody knows who we are and nobody will care what we're talking about. We won't be able to attract funders and we won't be able to attract members. So we actually have to say what we're doing. It's really important. So those of you who read the Catholic press will have seen that we're in it quite a lot recently. We're in it a lot more than we were before, and it's telling the stories of the people we help and of our members, of the people we help abroad, of really what we're about. So that's really important. Big thank you to Anita, who worked so incredibly hard and skillfully on that particular aspect of building the brand. Also social media, we've been terrible at this, but we're getting better. And we need to continue to put our presence out there, because that's the way we'll reach people who actually work in these spheres. So, and then for example, this has been our top tweet, a tweet from St. Augustine. What does love look like? It has the hands to help others, it has the feet to hasten to the poor and needy, it has the eyes to see misery and want, it has the ears to hear the sighs and sorrows of men. That is what love looks like. So we had 2,000 impressions, I'm reliably told, on that, so if you all know what that is, excellent. And we're going to be doing more of it, so watch this space.
Can you just tell everyone that we're tweeting?
Oh, we're tweeting?
All through this conference, and the hashtag is SVP Kingdom.
Did you all get that? SVP Kingdom. So follow the tweets. Tweet away, Twitter, whatever the proper verb for tweeting is, and spread the word.
Oh, sorry, SVP Kingdom as in voting Kingdom.
Yes. Yeah, SVP KINGDOM. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks very much. And we need, on that note, we need to be a mission-ready organisation, because, as we were saying, we have to be the best we can for those people that we are helping. Okay? So we have and will be investing in a technology strategy. Many of you took part in workshops, so we try to find out how developing technology and a strategy can work for you as members. Some people want to have an app on their phone that they can record their visits. Some people are less keen on that kind of thing, but certainly would like our computers to talk to each other and for there to be ease of use. So we need to do it. We need to do it for safety, modernity, to attract people who work this way now, and to make life easier for members and offer a better service. And Andrew is here, technical support, and he's our head of technology. And if you'd like to talk to him later about anything technology related, please do. It's very interesting. Mission Ready, we are leading on an international safeguarding programme. We were lucky enough to have funding from Porticus to enable us to look at how safeguarding is being done throughout the international SVP. This is very important for us. We have to do it anyway, because since the Save the Children and Oxfam problems and scandals, the Charity Commission absolutely insists that we can say, wherever we send money in the world, so to our twin brothers and sisters in India and Sudan, Guyana, everywhere, we can say that those people operate a proper safeguarding system. And if we can't say that, we are breaching the Charity Commission rules. So luckily we have Catherine Kerr leading on this. We have expertise. We've started with our twins countries. Catherine has just come back from Juba with Ian on a visit to South Sudan. She's been talking to all of our other twins and is very satisfied so far with the collaboration that she's had. But we want to make sure, as we have been funded for this, that the whole of the SVP becomes properly up to date in safeguarding. So that's an exciting and important project. We, the staff, I should say, and as an organisation, we were awarded the IIP, which is Investors in People. Is there a thing? Oh, there it is. Investors in People standard, which means that we are investing in our staff, and our staff are engaged with the organisation. And when I spoke to the inspector, most importantly, he said, he was very impressed with the way everybody lived out our values. The staff absolutely live and breathe our values, and that's the most important thing we could have got out of that, and we should be very grateful to them for doing that. So, here are the vital statistics, the kind of thing that Matt was talking about. Over 9,000 members, goes up, comes up and goes down. We're hoping it's going to continue to go up. Made over 440,000 visits, that knock on the door in 2017 and 18, and provided material assistance, those resources, over 91,000 times. So those are our statistics. However, as Paul Broder said, statistics are human beings with the tears wiped away. And I think this is what Matt was talking about earlier. Every single SVP member here has a story, knows stories, knows people, know the people that you visit. Every single member here knows the value of turning up, knocking on the door, handing over 2 bags of food, or simply saying, "How are you today?" Invaluable. Our staff in our support centres know the effect of welcoming a bruised refugee and saying, "Come in, we want you here." It's huge. Those stories are immense. And I think sometimes we can be criticised for being a sticking plaster organisation. We just deal with somebody who's immediately hungry. We don't deal with the consequences of hunger. We don't help them out of their poverty. And actually, in many cases, we do. However, that sticking plaster means friendship. It means dignity. It means seeing Christ in those people we're visiting. It means living out the gospel message. It's a very important sticking plaster. Sometimes it helps people through their day, that knock on the door. Sometimes it's life-saving. So one story, again from my conference, Becky, who is here, is involved. So our conference has been supporting somebody called Marie, who is addicted to alcohol. And she's had many problems in her life, but was being helped professionally and doing really well. Had just moved house, and our conference were helping her bring things in, household goods. I think the week before, Becky and others had seen her, taken her out for a cup of tea. She was doing brilliantly, life was really positive, everything was going really well. Last week, they knocked the door, and it was an absolute car crash. Marie had well and truly fallen off the wagon. She was in a completely terrible state, and she wanted to kill herself. And there was no doubting that. So that knock on the door happened at the right time. They were able to get her the assistance that she needed professionally, and then she went into crisis care, and hopefully we're praying that she is doing better, and they're visiting her there. But what happened when they were waiting for the care to kick in, and for the people to come and the professionals to get involved, was that Marie said to Becky, "I just don't want to go on. What have I got to live for?" And Becky said, "Well, I did bring you an ironing board," which I have to say was and at which point they both laughed, burst out laughing, and Marie said, "Okay, so I can do my ironing then." But the point about that is that, of course, it wasn't about the ironing board. It was the fact that she brought the ironing board. It was the fact that she'd knocked the door, and it was the fact that she cared. And those are the things that will make a difference. So Matt also talked about we need to give people a voice. So I'm now going to give a voice to Andrew, and I need other Andrew to come to the technical bit so that we can do this. And listen to Andrew's voice talking about his story.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I suffer from bipolar. I've had a lot of stressful situations over the past 2 or 3 years. I lost my mum and my dad, my sister to cancer, and my daughter, and 3 days before her 18th birthday, in the space of 3.5 years. When I first came, I never spoke, I never talked to nobody. to a situation where, before I came to St Vincent's, I sat in the house and the house was on fire. And the fire brigade came in, took the door off. I've also done things in the dark days. Well, I mean here. At St Vincent's, what they've done is unbelievable for me. I've got structure. I'm happier than I have been for years. To much feed, you simply die. The image will never leave my brain. But I've had to suffer with the anxiety of losing. Well, in time, I've only got my brother left, and he lives in Liverpool. There was a time when it got that bad. I didn't eat for 4 weeks. That's why I had to come under the mental health. I actually got sectioned. I got sectioned because of the fire, actually. I burnt my cooker. My washing machine went on Boxing Day, and St Vincent's got me a cooker. They got me a washing machine. I've done things what I haven't done for a long, long time here. The next year I'm fed. I always get a dinner. I always get a cup of tea. There's always a friendly word. I talk to people, and I've actually made friends here from complete isolation for 2 years. But it's nearly an end. The nightmare is nearly an end. And hopefully I can go on and even get more better. I'm just going to say that I'll never forget St Vincent, what they did for me. Never. I want to give back to what's been given to me. It's been fantastic. That's all I can say.
Well, I don't think I need to say any more after Andrew's testimony, other than to say thank you very much for listening. Keep up all the fantastic work you do, and enjoy the next 2 days. Looking forward to catching up with you over a cup of tea or a glass of wine in the bar as well.
Thank you, Helen, for really inspiring leadership and direction for us. And what we have to do is to embed that now in the next 36 hours. 2 quick announcements. An evaluation sheet, please do fill it in. Why? Because A, it helps us get resources in the future for future conferences, but it also helps us run the next year's better. So fill it in as you go along, and you can do it anonymously if you would. Secondly, an announcement really. We have with us Celia from the Churches, Charities and Local Authorities called CLLA. They are an ethical investment company, and they generously support our national marketing. Celia Waring is with us for the duration of our conference. Can we give her a warm welcome? Thank you. Now I need some help, because we move to the next stage, which is the seminars, to look at how we deepen our practice and engagement. There are 4 sessions: homelessness, offender, stranger, and those seeking those most in need. On the back of your lanyard, you may be signed up into a workshop. Go to it. St Vincent said, if you can't do it all, do what you can if you take on too much. So I'm going to ask you if you can go to the workshops as smartly as possible. We've moved lunch to 1 o'clock, so if you get there smartly and get on with it, we'll catch some of the time. If you haven't signed up for the workshops, only 2 are now available, and they are the offender and the stranger. People outside will help and guide you. Get there as quick as you can, and don't forget the exhibition and the shop at lunchtime.